use the word hijack because he believes we've outsourced our thinking. He thinks we outsourced our thinking, first of all, years ago to religion, which told us what to do, how to behave. It was then outsourced to the monarchies that existed across the world. It's now currently been outsourced to the media and to celebrities, obviously present company accepted. And they tell us what to think. And he says, no, I want it to be hijacked because we have to take their minds back from giving it away to other people and back into people's heads. So the whole purpose of this book was to get people to start critically thinking about why they follow social norms that have been around for years. So I have this fantastic panel with me, and I'm going to be asking you some questions, some perhaps difficult questions at times. So Jim, I'm going to start with you. One of the chapters in this book, in fact chapter 1, is I would never sleep with a stranger unless it was my husband. That gets silence, doesn't it? Right? It gets silence because the story goes that Alyque was invited to Calcutta to speak at a women's lunch, and he said that they all came in dripping with jewelry and wearing beautiful saris, and his first sentence to them was, would you allow your kids to sleep with strangers? And they all kind of arched their backs and they said, Mr. Padamsee, how can you even suggest such a thing? That's what those American divorcees do. And he said, okay. And then he said, and how many of you believe in arranged marriages? And then the penny dropped. He says, you don't want them to sleep with strangers, but you're telling them to sleep with whoever you say, even if they don't know them. So this was the start of a chapter on hypocrisies. So Jim, the book has got several hypocrisies in that chapter. Are there any that stand out to you, or is there anything else? What's the biggest hypocrisy that you think we need to get rid of in India?
Well, is it on? Can you hear me? Well, I do have to say right off the bat that I believe that actually being hypocritical is, everyone is hypocritical. Every single person in this place is hypocritical. If you aren't hypocritical, you're akin to a saint, in my opinion. I believe we all live under the principle of do as I say, not as I do. And I think that the hypocrisy is just deeply embedded inside of us. There's so many of them. The same advice we'll give someone else, we won't take. The same way we want our family to be treated, we won't treat other families. The same way we want to treat the people we love, we won't treat people we don't care about or don't fit within our idea of worth or our socio-economic strata or whatever it is. And I think we all are dripping with hypocrisies. But if we're talking about specifically in India, larger hypocrisies, then there are so many, and I think one of the main ones is the difference between how we treat people in different socio-economic classes.
Okay, so if you were to expand that a bit more, what do you mean by the way we treat people in different socio-economic classes?
Well, we all would openly say that we believe in respect and respecting each other and being kind to our neighbor, etc., etc. But I mean, that respect often only extends to people within this who think the same way as you or are within the same socio-economic strata as you. And you often talk to people that work for you or people you think are beneath you in this social hierarchy that we very much continue to prop up and support very differently.
Very, very good point. And that was one thing that really upset Alyque, which is why he did so much social work. And he did all these brilliant adverts. Do you remember the advert of the tomatoes in the jar? Do some of you remember that? So the government came to Alyque and said, Mr. Padamsee, we need to reduce the population in India. And he said there's two ways to do it. And originally, we won't talk about Kama Sutra condoms yet, we'll talk about them after. But he did an advert where he got a jar and they had 2 tomatoes in the jar. And basically, if you put the third one in and turned the lid, all of the tomatoes burst. And he showed this advert to the government, and the government said, Mr. Padamsee, you haven't said anything about population control. And he said, really, is that what you think? So they took the advert to all these villages across India, and they said, what do you think this represents? And astoundingly, across the country, everyone said, this is obvious. This is like, ek ya do bus means we should only have 2 kids. Because if we have a third, we won't have enough money. So it's pretty amazing. He was always thinking about the underdog, and he was always looking at how he could bring them up. So thanks for that, Jim. Dalip, have you got any hypocrisies that you think exist in the world today that we should eliminate? What would make India a better place?
How much time do you have? I think Jim pretty much summed it up. First of all, I'd like to wish you all a very good evening, and thank you all for having me here, and Raell. It's a pleasure to be here. I worked a lot with Alyque, and I absolutely consider him my guru in the theatre, and he helped influence me in a lot of things that have helped me in my future career. Having said that, I don't know, life itself seems to be such a big hypocrisy. There's always a duality, there's always double speak. There doesn't seem to be any kind of sort of truth that you can completely rely on any longer. In any aspect, it's becoming increasingly difficult. And we all have our personal hypocrisies that are often controlled by a lot of social factors. And like I said, it's extremely difficult to pinpoint one because there are so many. And let me just say that, unfortunately, our lives have just become a constant hypocrisy.
Our lives have become a constant hypocrisy. Fair enough, and that's probably one of the reasons why Alyque, at the end of the book, has said, look, Moses may have written the 10 Commandments back then, but it's time to revise those commandments, and each of us should think about bringing out our own commandments that we stick by to try and get rid of these hypocrisies. So we're going to be interested at the end to find out what your favourite commandment is. But in the meantime, I'm just curious to know from the audience, what hypocrisies do you think we need to get rid of in India? Is anyone going to be brave enough? Okay, we have Harshman. Yeah. Can we get the mic up?
People in the age bracket of 50 and above running the country, which actually has a humongous
676 million
youth population. And there's a hypocrisy right there. And going back to the original one as well about would you marry, would you have sex with a stranger? Would you sleep with a stranger? I think the sexual neuroses in this country are off the charts because it's been kept a taboo for so long, and it's continued to be something that you don't talk about. I mean, in one way, it is supposed to increase the excitement of it, but all it really does, in my opinion, is like create neuroses, which is why sexual violence is so humongous in this country, because we don't have no sex education from a young, early age.
Thank you for bringing up that point. I think one of the things we talk about later in the book is speaking the unspoken dialogues. So you just did that. You spoke about something that we don't talk about. So thank you for bringing that up. That's brilliant. Okay, well, we've heard from 3 stalwarts on the stage. What we'd like to do now is go and hear from somebody else. So we have Ronnie Screwwala, who's going to be telling us. Yeah, he's on the screen.
What is the most important?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact.
And so that discipline, did you see discipline coming in there?
Absolutely. I mean, the theatre, I quite agree with anyone who says that there is a lot of discipline required in the theatre. I don't think you can really survive in the theatre or actually in the performing arts or many other things if you don't have an inherent discipline. And working with Alyque, that was one of the most important things that I imbibed in the theatre, which has helped me in good stead all my life because I'm a professional actor, is a sense of discipline in the simplest of things. That you just, be on time. And most important thing, And one of the very, very important things in our lives all over the world, particularly in India, is be on time, which sends a signal of discipline and respect for the other person's time. And it is in the community that that respect grows. And with that comes, I think, a sort of a work and an emotional air force that is really so important for progress. So yeah, I mean, the theatre teaches you a lot of disciplines. It also teaches you it teaches you how to work on your character. It teaches you the discipline of how you approach a job and the systematic, perhaps systematic or not so systematic approach. So it is discipline all over the place.
Okay, so now I'm going to really do an Alyque Padamsee on you. What about discipline in marriage?
I mean, that's a contradiction in terms. Discipline in marriage. Oh, God.
Before you answer
You're really making me do the heavy lifting today.
That's the purpose. Okay, let me set the context so that the audience has it, and then you can answer. So we have a chapter in the book which is, do you need a license to marry your partner? How many of you think it would be better, instead of having till death do us part, we have a 5-year marriage license? Just put your hand up if you agree. A renewable 5-year marriage license.
Is this being recorded? Because if my wife
And that is the question. Okay, so a few of you. Now let's explain the logic. And then Dalip will come to you. So Alyque says in the book, he says he's looked around the world and he's looked at this concept of marriage. Now remember when marriage as an idea came about, it was 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, when we probably only lived to be 30. So when you said till death do us part, you were probably only alive for 15 years after that. Now, you're getting married and it's supposed to be until death do us part. It could be for 65, 75, 85 years. Now, think about this. At school, before you get to the next grade, you have to take an exam. At work, if you want to be promoted, you have an appraisal. You can see where this is going. What about marriage? Nothing to say that you've got to perform. Now, Alyque says the answer to this is, let us have a 5-year renewable marriage license. Now the whole idea of it is, in year 4, the idea is not to end the marriage. The idea is in year 4, you suddenly start thinking, this has actually been really good, but am I doing enough for my partner? Am I spending time with them? Am I doing what they need? And your partner's going to think the same. It can only be renewed if both parties agree. So Dalip, what do you think of this idea of Alyque's?
Well, thanks for...
Can we have the mic on? I think it's...
Well, thanks for coming back to me. That famous line, I mean, the marriage to death do us part, I think, is solely responsible for people fleeing from the altar of marriage and from the mandap and, having 10 thoughts before getting married. About this 5-year license thing, it's a great thought in terms of the fact that, you have a trial marriage, basically. It also it reminds me of having like a temporary driver's license, where if you do not perform, do you then get negative points, and does that not qualify you to get a license that actually says till death do us part? So there's that aspect to it. And are there, if you're having a trial between partners, whoever they may be, man and man, woman and man, so let's deal here with the conventional woman and man. You are actually giving them a trial period. I would assume that they get along and then they decide that they want to go ahead with the marriage. Now, is there a caveat there, saying that in that period, for example, you say, just so that we can establish your relationship, you don't have any children? Because I can't help but believe that if you have a 5-year trial period, and let's say you both want to sort of go your own way after that, and there's a kid, or there's a child, it's bound to complicate the whole situation. I mean, it just does. So, I mean, as much as it's very interesting thought, but I know Alyque, and he would have always wanted his thoughts and his ideas to be able to be incorporated and inculcated into society so that they, are then effective for society. So I have, I don't know, I'm not too happy on any licenses for marriage, in fact. I mean, I think the whole concept really came, as it came in India, I believe, in my sort of loose understanding of history, from the Victorian age. Because before the Victorians came into India, the system of marriage in India was really quite flexible. I mean, in terms of, it wasn't uncommon for Hindu and Muslim men to have more than one wife for different sociological reasons. And even in the West, when the Victorians finally got rid of the corset of marriage emotionally and physically, and the women were under so much suppression at that time, quite literally, because of their tight corsets. Then came the First World War, and that completely changed the very premise of what a man and a woman's relationship conventionally would possibly be.
Because before that, the woman was always reliant.
Quite frankly, millions of young men died in the trenches of Europe. So women came to work in Europe and in the UK and everywhere where the war was. So the whole concept that women can't work with machines, as I said in Titanic, went out of the window, and suddenly women became a major working force. And when the time came for them to marry, there were no men. They were all dead, poor fellow. They were in trenches. I mean, they're not useful to a marriage if you're in a grave. So, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be therapy, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it depends which marriage. So, I mean, that whole thing changed, and the whole premise changed, and then 2 decades later, there's another world war. And that went to, just took the whole thing even further. Then we come into the age of after the wars, you have the rock and roll era, free love, free society. Nobody wanted any kind of restrictions or being told what to do through that cycle. And somewhere down it's percolated into India, and it's just so difficult to pinpoint marriage. I mean, I just think it's a complete mess. I mean, it's really difficult to
So we need to rethink the whole concept.
It was in so many ways. And in fact, I think if a man and a woman really want to spend their time together, all you need is that line saying, "Till death do you part." And you go, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't know. I mean, it's like, how long is this going to last, And I really, I don't have the answers, to be very honest. I can just sort of speculate and take you through this.
I love meeting people who have bigger commitment issues than me.
Shiamak, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this idea of a 5-year marriage license?
I think the woman should be given the right to say yes or no for a change.
The woman should be given the right.
What do you say?
Women, we love Shiamak.
I think that's really important because in a male-dominant society, I think women should be given ease and some power.
Why do you think women should be given?
Because my mother, I know it sounds corny, my grandmother, Fearless Nadia Nazarwali, my spiritual guru who wrote the book, The Laws of the Spirit World, I think these were very strong women. My mother used to work, like a man. She used to do everything like a man. She would be exactly the same energy as a male. So the thing is that I do believe that women are very strong. I think that somewhere they are even stronger than men. I also believe that they're the only portal that can bring a soul from the spirit world to earth. So that's a powerful portal that she has. And she's the only one who can do that. So what I'm going to say is this feminine energy which is not being given priority because of this, male thingy, I think that's why I said women should be given the priority.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Whose side are you on?
It's pretty clear.
I've always said, it's the women who control this world. It's a completely matriarchal world. When you're not looking or knowing, that's what's happening. So, there's no denying it.
Yeah. Brilliant.